All right, I think it's time for us to go ahead and get started. Again, I appreciate you being with us today. I appreciate you joining us today for this webinar, and we know that you have a lot of things going on, and we're grateful that you took some time out to join us. We're hoping that you find the information that we provide in this webinar, and if you're joining us for some of the other webinars in this series, you will find that information useful. So before we get started, though, as many of you may already know, WHRO, who is hosting all of these webinars, is actually owned by the 21 school divisions in the Hampton Roads region. And that's why we provide these services to the school divisions. But one of the things we do is every year we provide the superintendents and the school boards with a report on services that we've provided to their individual school divisions. So before we begin the session today, we would like to get information from you on which school division you work in. Now, I'm dealing with the polls tool within Zoom, and one of the limitations of the polls tool is that it only allows you to put 10 selections in for a question. So what I've had to do is break this poll up into 3 screens. On one screen, I have 7 school divisions. On the second screen, I have 7 school divisions. And on the third screen, I have 7 school divisions. So you'll actually have to go through all 3 screens of the survey in order for us to capture this information. Before I put the survey up, before I put the poll up, I wanted to give you some information about how it will look. So you'll see the first screen of the poll. It will have 7 school divisions listed. And if none of those are your school division, there should be a choice there for you to move on to the next screen and find your school division on the next screen. And then if your school division isn't on the next screen, then you go on to the third screen to find your school division there. So it is a 3-question survey. You'll have to work your way through each of the screens in order to complete the poll. I had it set up with an 8th selection. I don't see it on the one that I'm looking at right now. And the 8th selection is none of the above. And since I'm not seeing it on mine and I haven't launched this yet, I don't know if yours will have that 8th choice. If it does on a screen and your school division is not on that screen, then select that, none of the above. If none of the above shows up, just move on to the next screen. So I'm going to launch the poll. Let's see if we can gather all this information. So please go ahead and complete the poll. Yeah, you pick your answer. I believe there is a button at the bottom to continue to the next screen. That's right, all 3 questions appear on the same screen. I'm sorry. So make your selection and then select submit.
So I'm reading some of the comments in the chat, and it looks like quite a few people are having trouble submitting. And Elmer, I bet that is because it wants them to answer all 3 questions before submitting, is my suspicion.
It's very possible. Um, Hold on for just a moment. Well, it looks like trying to do the survey this way with 3 separate questions is not going to be useful. So let's do something different to make sure we capture all of this. If you would, in the chat area, so that we can make sure we accurately capture who has attended from each school division, if you would type your name and your school division in the chat area and then submit that, that will allow us to collect that information. Evidently, I can't use the survey tool in Zoom this way in order to capture this much information. So while we're wrapping that up, let me welcome you again to this session on organizing your distance learning classroom. And then today, the presenters are myself. I'm Elmer Seward. I'm Vice President for Education Services at WHRO. Just a little bit of background on me. Before I came to my current position, I worked for 11 years as the instructional supervisor for Virtual Virginia, the Virginia Department of Education's online program for secondary students. And then I came over and became the director of eMedia VA for a couple of years and then moved into this position a couple of years ago. We also have Janie Everett, who's going to be doing a presentation today, and I'll give Janie a little time to talk about herself and tell you about her background.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janie Everett. I also work at WHRO. I am the Educational Technology Manager at WHRO, and that basically means that I travel to schools either in person or digitally like we are now, and I help educators use technology that will benefit their students in the classroom setting. Before coming to WHRO, I started my career as an elementary school teacher. I taught a few different grade levels, and that's where my love for educational technology developed. So from there, I became an instructional technology specialist. I did that at Virginia Beach City Public Schools for a while, and then I came on over to WHRO. Oh, and also, we're going to talk quite a bit, obviously, about distance learning today and what things we're already using and what we can use to make our lives a little bit easier. So I also wanted to mention that I have a very heavy background in Schoology. I used it quite a bit when I worked at Virginia Beach, and I was also a Schoology ambassador. So I worked with the company quite closely too, and I even went to their Schoology conference that they do every year. So I do have some experience also in some others like Canvas and Moodle. I use Google Classroom, Microsoft Classroom, but Schoology is really my LMS specialty.
And as Janie pointed out, there are a number of learning management systems that are available out there. I will tell you that my background is mostly in Desire to Learn. I have some background with Canvas and some background with Moodle. And so between us, we have a fair amount of background in learning management systems, but we also have another person with us who is going to help with the chat and answer questions. And that's Mitzi Fels-Seward, who's the Vice President for Digital Learning at WHRO. Mitzi has background in, I think, about 7 different learning management systems because she builds the courses that we provide to school divisions in the region and makes them available in a number of different learning management systems. So I would say to you, if you need help with Schoology as we're going along, Janie's a great resource. Mitzi's a great resource. You need help with Canvas. I know Mitzi knows Canvas very well. She's a great resource. Desire to learn Mitzi, I would be glad to help out as well. Moodle, I know Mitzi has a lot of background with Moodle. I have some background with Moodle. Just to let you know that as we're moving through and navigating this strange new world that we're in, if you need help with learning management systems, we have a rich background in working with learning management systems at WHRO. Now, before we move on, I'm going to try again one more survey, and hopefully this one's going to work for us. In this one, I'm just interested in finding out which learning management systems you're using in your school division. So I'm going to launch the poll. I'd like for you to make a selection and then select submit. And I see we're close to having all of the results in. I'll give you just a moment longer. And if you're not using a learning management system, then select none of the above. Or if you're using a different learning management system, it's not listed. Okay, well, let's take a quick look at the poll. And it appears that 19% of the people in this session are using Canvas. Another 19% are using Schoology. We don't have any Brightspace users, and we don't have any Moodle users. Google Classroom, we have 55%, and 7% said none. Just to give you an idea of the range of backgrounds of individuals who are attending this session. And I want to use that to make a point in a moment. Now, I've got one more poll I'd like to conduct. And I'd like to get information on the grade level range where you're teaching. So if you would just select whether you're an elementary school teacher, a middle school teacher, or a high school teacher. Okay, great. So here are our results. For this session, we're heavily elementary teacher loaded. We have 58% of the attendees are elementary teachers, 27% are middle school teachers, and 20% are high school teachers. And the point I wanted to make in these two questions is one of the difficulties we had in putting together this webinar is that we have teachers from 21 different school divisions, teachers who are teaching elementary, middle, and high school, teachers that are using a range of learning management systems, and then on top of it, each school division doing something different and slightly their own in what they're doing as far as distance learning is concerned. And we're also faced with the unknown of the coming year. We don't know exactly what school is going to look like. We were in a session with superintendents just yesterday, the 21 area superintendents. And the message there was that they're still trying to make sense of the 100+ page document that they've received from the VDOE. And by make sense, I mean that they're trying to determine exactly what it is they need to do in order to be able to meet the requirements for opening school and what that's going to look like. They're still trying to sort that all out. So we don't even know what the school year, beginning of the school year, is going to look like. So when we put together a presentation like this, the question is, how do we present information to you that's going to be relevant to your specific situation in your specific school division with the learning management system or other tools you're using, and processes and procedures that are different from school division to school division. And that was the challenge that we were faced with. And so as we approached this, we decided that what we would do is we would focus on concepts and talk about concepts that were important for you to keep in mind as you're working with students at a distance. And hopefully you would be able to apply those concepts to your specific situations. And secondly, we would focus on tools that you might be able to use depending on your school division's policies and procedures, and depending on what you already have available in your school division. So you'll find that today is mostly concept driven. Janie is going to be sharing one tool with you later in the presentation. Next week is going to be more tool driven with some concepts. And then the 3 remaining sessions in the webinar series are mostly tool driven. So what is it like to teach at a distance? When I was supervisor of instruction for Virtual Virginia, I used to train new teachers at the beginning of the year. And when I did, I liked to use this video at the beginning of those training sessions. This is a commercial. You may remember it. You may have seen it. It was a commercial that was produced by EDS, a technology company. And it was one of those Super Bowl commercials. And it struck me, and it's always stayed with me. And it reminds me of what it's like to teach at a distance. So I'd like to share that with you. So in a sense, that's what we are doing as well. You're trying to herd cats. And I imagine you've probably felt that way over the last few weeks, that what you were doing was not the easiest task in the world. And you were trying to get your hands around lots of different things and keep everybody on task and keep everybody straight. And so what we're going to talk about today are concepts to kind of help you in trying to organize that and help you herd the cats, because it isn't easy to manage all of the tools and students in different locations and parents and technologies and content. So hopefully we'll share with you a few things today that will help you as you approach that for the coming year.
This man right here is my great.
Let me get back to the PowerPoint presentation. So a question that I have for you, what is the central factor for student success in distance learning? And I'd like to see what you think. I've put together some ideas. And so this is I believe this is the last poll that I have for us for today. So I'd like to see what you think as far as what is the central factor for student success in distance learning. So let me launch the poll. Let me get your thoughts on this. Okay, let's see what you have to say. Well-designed instructional materials, 16% said that. A calendar of activities and assignments, 6%. Live instruction, 7%. Learning management system, 12%. Teacher presence, I think that's 15%. I don't have my glasses on. With timely feedback, 2%. A sense of class, community, and collaboration, 43%. So most of the people have fallen on the last one, a sense of class, community, and collaboration. And to be honest with you, all of these are important. All of these are very important, and you really can't ignore any of them. In fact, I think I didn't get the chance to share that with you. So there it is. Now you can see the results. But looking at the research and looking at articles written regarding online learning and distance learning, the central piece of it is the teacher and teacher presence. Because without you, without the teacher, none of that makes a bit of difference. You're the one who selects all of those instructional materials. You're the one who makes the tools work. You're the one who keeps the students engaged. It is the teacher and your presence that is central to making distance learning work. So how do you establish presence? How do you make yourself available to students and make yourself visible to students and make yourself work as the center of instruction? Well, one of the things is live web sessions. It sounds like something that is just intuitive, but I've actually heard of classes that have been conducted without any live sessions at all over the last few weeks. It's important for students to see you. It's important for students to hear you. It's important for you to be able to share information with them in live sessions. So live web sessions are an important part of establishing your presence. Students see you, students hear you, students are engaged with you. Remember, the whole point of this is for you to keep students engaged. Because just like the video I showed you of the cats out on the prairie, without you to keep them engaged, they would be going off in all different directions. It is easier for them to fall out of your class when you're doing distance learning than it is for them to fall out when they're sitting in your classroom. Daily emails or news items to students. You're not going to be able to run a live web session every day or all day long. There are going to be times when you're not going to be upfront with students, but they need to see you involved in the course in one way or another. And I would suggest that you need to have daily contact with students in some manner, whether it's an email that goes out to the class, whether it's a news item that's posted in a learning management system, whether it's some other blast that you put out. Students need to see you on a daily basis involved, Because if they don't see you and you're not involved in the class, then they tend to drop out and not be involved in the class as well. Phone calls to disengaged students. It is very easy for students to fall off the map when you're teaching at a distance. And it's important for you to reach out and bring them back when you see that they're disengaged. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit on another slide. But it's important for you to be making contact with students when you find that they're not engaged in the learning. Judicious use of materials and assignments. When school closing was announced, I got a chance to see firsthand how some teachers handled it. And unfortunately, in some cases, it was just tons of work. Here's lots of work for you to do. That's not going to bring about student learning. A more reasonable amount of work, but work that is meaningful, is the way to keep students engaged. Students know when they're getting work just to keep them busy. They also know when you're giving them meaningful work to do. So judicious use of materials and assignments. Materials as well. Don't just throw out materials. Oh, here's lots of videos. Here are lots of things to read. Choose things wisely. Keep the workload reasonable. And keep in mind that that will also keep the workload reasonable for you as well. Timely feedback on assignments. We know from research that this is important in student success. Students must hear back on their assignments. They submit work, they don't hear back from you for a while, they're not as likely to submit the next assignment. And the learning that happens from that assignment that they submitted is diminished by the time that they do get the feedback. Feedback needs to be immediate. Participation in discussions. It's important for you, if you're using online discussions, it's important for you to participate in those discussions. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take a side, but for you to ask follow-on questions to help spur thought, to piggyback on something a student says and ask a follow-on question that then spurs students to think more about the topic. They see you in the discussion forum, they see you involved, and that is going to tend to make them more engaged in the discussion as well. Plus, it's important for you to monitor discussions, simply to make sure that they don't go places you don't want them to go. I've seen instances where online discussion forums quickly turned into bullying sessions, unfortunately. So it's important for you to be actively involved in the discussion forums and for the students to see that you're actively involved. Being available, it's specific. One of the difficult pieces about teaching at a distance is you give students something in a class, they can ask you a question right away. Teaching at a distance, they don't have that opportunity. They need to know when they can ask questions and how they get to you and when they can get to you to get the answers to their questions. It's very important. And be real. I'll tell you, you probably won't get it right away, but you actually had an advantage these past few weeks when schools closed. It's an advantage that you won't have probably at the beginning of next school year. Your students already knew you, and you already knew your students. Beginning of the school year, you're going to be starting with new students, students you don't know, students who don't know you. And if you're going to establish yourself in a relationship with those students, it has to be more than I'm just the teacher. You have to share some about yourself as well. It all has to be professional. But allow them to know you as a person, not just as a teacher. Again, these are general concepts. Each of you have to take a look at these and ask yourself, how might I be able to apply these In the particular circumstance that I have in my school division with the tools I have available, some of you may not have online discussion forums, and that may not even apply to you. But take what you have, and remember, these are all tips for your presence as a teacher on a daily basis with your students. It's very important. If you want to keep them engaged, you have to show them that you're engaged. So one of the biggest problems that teachers have when they're teaching at a distance is organization. And that is because teaching at a distance is very much like teaching students individually. We're so used to in the classroom doing presentations, meeting as a group, talking as a group, answering questions as a group. Teaching at a distance is very different. And so I want to give you a few ideas to keep in mind as you try to organize yourself in dealing with all these things. First of all, have a daily schedule. If it's not possible for you to have the same schedule every day, then I would say if you could at least have a consistent Monday schedule and a consistent Tuesday schedule and a consistent Wednesday schedule. And we'll talk about weekly schedule as well, so that the students know, and you can communicate this to students. Here is the schedule for the week. Here is when we will have, if we're going to have online sessions, we're going to have direct instruction via Zoom or some other web conferencing software. This is when it will happen on this day. And if you can make that consistent week after week, then the students get into a rhythm and they understand when they should be doing things. When can they contact you to answer questions, have you answer questions? When do assignments have to be turned in? As much as you can make the schedule consistent from day to day, from week to week, it helps your students know what they're doing and when they're supposed to be doing it, because they don't have the structure of school anymore. You have to provide the structure for them. Live instructional sessions, when will you have them? How many of them will you have? Some of you, that may be driven by your local school division's policies, but where you have opportunities to make those choices and set that and make that a regular thing and make it consistent on your schedule and communicate that to students on a regular basis, the easier you'll make it for your students to be successful working at a distance. Open office hours. These are times and, let me go back to the live instructional sessions for just a moment, because there's something that I left out there. If you are a secondary teacher, a teacher who shares students, and some elementaries do some teaming as well, but usually student sharing happens at the secondary level. If you're a teacher and you teach secondary students, and you may have already discovered this from your experience in the past few weeks, you need to find a consistent way of not scheduling over one another your live instructional sessions. When I was working with Virtual Virginia, we basically blocked out, we worked as if we were a school. We were a program, but we functioned much like a school because we had math teachers, science teachers, social studies teachers, English teachers, and we blocked out schedules during the week. We would say Monday morning was reserved for English teachers to have their their live instructional sessions. Monday afternoon was another subject area. Tuesday morning was another subject area. And so you knew if you were an English teacher, Monday morning was the day you would be giving your live instructional session, and the math teacher wouldn't schedule theirs at the same time. The social studies teacher wouldn't schedule theirs at the same time. So if you've had issues with that in the past, as a school, I would talk with your school or with the teachers on your grade level and work out a schedule so that each of you have times to set up those live instructional sessions that won't conflict with others who are teaching the same students, because the students are the ones who lose out when that happens. The open office hours, opportunities for students to tell you they need help, to come in and meet with you one-on-one. It could be on the phone, or it could be in Zoom, or whatever web conferencing software you're using, for you to explain how to do problems, for you to answer questions, for you to help them, and also for you to times for you to set up tutorials as well when you can work with students. Small group tutorials is the next thing that's mentioned. Time in the schedule, blocked out on a weekly basis, daily basis, weekly basis, when you know that you can pull students who need extra help and work with them. Student parent outreach. There needs to be some time in your schedule when you're actually reaching out to parents, reaching out to students, trying to pull in these students who are getting lost. You haven't heard from a student in a while, a student hasn't turned in work for a while, reach out to that student, try to get them re-engaged, reach out to those parents, try to get that student re-engaged. But you need to schedule yourself some time, and students need to understand when that is so they know that you're not available during that time to answer questions. And then required meetings. If you have required meetings during the school day, and you may or may not, but if you have required meetings, I would show that on the schedule as well, so that students and parents know there's a reason they can't reach you during that time, because you're required to be in a meeting. And as much as you can put this into a schedule and you've got it as your weekly schedule, it helps you in organizing what you're doing and what you're going to be doing and when you're going to be doing, instead of scrambling around trying to handle everything at the same time. And it makes it so much easier for your students in understanding exactly how class will run. And then organization, personal. Tracking student work completion. I know that if you're using a learning management system, each of them has their own tracking system, and you'll have to take a look at what information that gives you. The nice thing about a learning management system is it may tell you if the student has completed certain sections. It will also tell you if they've completed certain assignments. You can go in, I know that in a Desire to Learn, for example, I can look in a Dropbox, which is where the students submit their assignments. And in a quick glance, I can see who submitted their work and who hasn't submitted their work. You can use that to help track work completion. And then I'm going to add a second thing here, tracking student interaction. At Virtual Virginia, teachers used a spreadsheet, especially for the student interaction. They would put down in their spreadsheet live sessions, student recordings, and let me talk about that. If you're going to run a live session, please record it and post the recording link for those who can't attend live. Things happen. Things happen in people's lives, and so it's great to think that we'll get everybody to come to the live session, but sometimes it doesn't happen. One of the things that we did in Virtual Virginia was that there would be an assignment that had to be completed by the student. It was a simple assignment, but if a student watched the recording rather than attending the live session, they had to complete that assignment. One, it showed that they had actually watched the recording, and two, it then allowed the teacher to see that the student had been engaged with that learning. And so the teachers could record that in the spreadsheet that they had as well. They could quickly look down the spreadsheet and tell who had not been involved in that. They would have things like check for understanding phone calls that they did, those were listed there. They would have phone calls to parents that they'd made, and then they could check all of those things off. And then as they looked over their spreadsheet, it made it very easy for them to see which students were disengaged, which students they had to reach out to, and which parents they needed to work with. And I think you can see how this becomes very much like working with students one-on-one as you start talking about all of these different ways to try to manage keeping up with students and where they are. It is very much, I think it is very much like herding cats when you're working with students at a distance. and tracking parent interactions as well. There's a great, it's a great way to keep track of when you've tried to contact parents. Many times you may try to make contact with parents and you just don't reach them, but you still want that. You want to have that information. And then you're able to reach them and you have a conversation with them. You want that information as well. All of that is important when you're working with students at a distance. Now there's one more brief video I want to show you. It deals with the next topic we're going to talk about.
Sarah, can you make me 10 copies of this report? I'm gonna need it in about 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Board meeting, important.
Which way to the copier?
That way.
You're not so bad.
Well, thank you.
No problem.
You got a future with this company, Miss Connor.
Read the instructions.
I got this.
Problem with the audio in that, but hopefully you got the message. The idea was that when she was first given directions, it was only make 10 copies of this without any detail in how you go about doing it. And she went into the copy room and found a copier that looked like it was more high tech than she knew how to manage. And then when she saw the directions on the wall, it became clear to her how to make the copier work. I think we take for granted sometimes that students understand what we're saying, and what gets lost in teaching at a distance. When we teach in a classroom, it's easy. We give some directions, the students get started. Somebody asks a question, you answer the question, everybody hears the answer, they move on. So there's not a problem if the directions aren't clear and concise and detailed. And we rarely think of that because students ask the question, we answer it, and it's just a normal thing that we do in classrooms. But teaching at a distance, it isn't easy for students to be able to ask those questions and have them answered. So your communication, in not only in directions, but all communication needs to be detailed. You've got to remember that you're not there to answer their questions. You're not there to give them everything they need. And if they have a question, it might be at least a day before they get the answer, which may keep them from getting the work completed. It needs to be clear, step-by-step directions. You've got to give careful consideration to your communication. Working at a distance is very difficult. We all know that emails can be misconstrued very easily. So you've got to work carefully on your communication, make sure that it is clear, that it is detailed, and that it doesn't leave any room for confusion on the part of the students or parents. Also keep in mind that sometimes humor gets lost in written communication. And so it's not always good as far as trying to include that in emails and other written communication that you're doing. You need to give people multiple methods of accessing the information in your course. So sending out stuff through email, sharing information with them in live sessions, making it available in a news item or some other place where you can post it so that people can go back and find it and can refer to it when they need to. Communication needs to be frequent. Remember, again, you need to be present. Students need to see you present. And so it's important that your communication is frequent. Now, Janie is going to be taking some time to talk to you about ClassDojo, which is a tool that you can use for communication. Some of you may already be familiar with it. She's going to do a brief overview today, and then she is doing a more in-depth session in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to turn the time over to Janie to talk to you about ClassDojo.
Hello, everybody. Janie again. So like Elmer mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about ClassDojo. It is going to be very brief. You might already be using ClassDojo. You might be using something else like Seesaw, which you will see is very, very similar, or you may not. And the great thing about ClassDojo is that I was watching your poll results earlier, and most of you said that communication is the most important factor in distance teaching, you know, keeping in contact with your students, but also their parents, especially for those of you who are elementary teachers, which again was quite a few of you. I know we also talked a little bit about learning management systems, and almost all of you are using a learning management system. But some of you are not. And if you're not using a learning management system, then you really need to find a separate way to keep in contact with parents and students. And even if you are using an LMS, you can still use ClassDojo. I find that of all the LMSs I have used, although they do all hold communication pieces, they don't tend to be quite as easy for parents to use as ClassDojo. This is a really, really easy one. You can go to the ClassDojo website, so can parents, or if you prefer, you can download the ClassDojo app on any cell phone or any tablet, and it's incredibly easy to use both for teachers and for parents as well. So if you've never heard of ClassDojo, I thought that this image summed it up really well. It turned your classroom into a community, which again, that's what most of you voted for earlier. You can share moments with parents, let the students create and share portfolios, and very easily access favorite teacher tools. Elmer, go ahead to the next slide for me. All right, so now these next 5 slides are going to be my 5 favorite features of ClassDojo, and just a little bit about them. So first, ClassDojo is probably most well known for managing student behavior. And this is a feature that you may or may not want to use in the fall, depending on what your school district looks like, you know, whether you go back to school full-time every day or half-time or maybe not at all. It's going to look different everywhere. So this may be useful for some teachers and maybe not for others, but basically each student gets one of these fun little monster characters. They're very appealing for the younger kids as well. And every time that student does something really great, you can give them a point. And then also, if you must, you can take points away as well. And the great thing about this is that ClassDojo will keep track of these points. So you can go in your app or your website and look at them anytime. Your students can do the same. And the best part is that parents can do the same. So parents join your ClassDojo with a code. It's very simple for them to join. And then they can see their students' points, and they can keep track of those points all day to see if their student is behaving at school or if maybe they're not. This is really great for teachers who like to reward students for positive behavior. You can say to students, if you get 15 points by the end of the day or by the end of the week, you get this reward that I've laid out ahead of time. So really great for managing student behavior. And like I said, I think that's what most teachers know this for, but there's really so much more. Elmer, go ahead to the second feature. You and parents can also view student work. Within the past 2 years, Class Dojo just added this feature. One of the things I love about them is that they're always updating their app and adding new features that they know will be handy for teachers and for families. So now students can take a picture of their work or take a screenshot of their work if it's something digital that they're doing, upload it to their portfolio. Now you can see the picture that the student posted, and their parents can also see the picture that they posted. And of course, there's also room for students to comment too. So if they, this boy in the picture, he's holding something up, we can't see it very well, he can also write a comment to explain what he's holding up, what he worked on, and then the teacher can also comment on this as well. This is a really great new feature that I think has come in handy. And students and parents cannot see other students' work. This is private between you, your one student, and their parent that is signed up. Each student has their own individual portfolio. Okay, go ahead to our next feature. Another one of my favorite features is posting about classroom events on the class story. So in a nutshell, the Class Dojo class story is like a little miniature Facebook or Twitter feed for your Class Dojo. So unlike the portfolios, the class feed, the class story is actually public to the whole class, not public to the world. You're not going to have strangers coming in here and viewing your posts, but everybody in your classroom can see it, including their parents. So you don't want to put anything personal about students in here, and you want to make sure if you post pictures of them that they have permissions. But this is a really great place. Say your class went on a field trip and you have a really great class picture or group pictures. You can post them here with comments, and then you can allow parents to comment as well if you want to. You can see at the top, you can also add files or recordings or events. So if your school is having a canned food drive and your principal has a flyer for it, you can upload that file to your class story. And now all of your parents in one quick, easy shot see your flyer for your canned food drive. And then if they have questions, they can contact you. You don't have to worry about sending a paper home in a backpack or anything like that. Go ahead to our next feature. Another big topic that we talked about today with Elmer is communication. So important to keep in contact with your students and your parents, especially when we're not in the same classroom together like right now. So probably the best feature of Class Dojo is communicating with parents. So not only do you have that big class story that we saw on the previous slide, but you also have individual conversation threads with each parent that is connected to your Class Dojo. So you can see in the picture, if you need to speak to Denzel Washington's parent, you can contact his mom individually with a message. The ones in blue are from the teacher. And then the nice thing about those blue messages is that when the parent has read it, that little check mark pops up next to the date. So you can see when a parent has read your message and if they're, ignoring you or, or whatever's going on. And then of course the parent can answer back. Again, just stressing this is just between you and this one parent. All the other parents do not get to see this. Everyone can see the class story, but this is just between you and one parent. And in my experience as an elementary school teacher, this is by far the easiest way to keep in contact with parents. most parents, I mean, it's very easy to get 100% participation with parents in Class Dojo because it's such an easy app and website to use. Most parents will respond to you in this app within minutes or at least within hours. It's very, very effective. Go ahead to the next slide. And this is another cool one. Once again, this is something that you're going to use more in the classroom. This may not be the greatest for distance learning, but it's a really cool feature for when we are back in our classrooms. Class Dojo has these 8 different options that you can put up on the board. We're not going through all of them individually today. We can do that at a later time, but you can post a timer on your board. If you choose Group Maker and you put in there that you want to have groups of 5, Dojo will automatically make groups for you so that you don't have to worry about kids picking their own groups and someone being singled out. The noise meter is very, very cool. It literally just keeps track of the noise in the classroom, and you can see it on a meter in the front, so the students can see it too when they're getting a little bit too loud. All sorts of really cool things that I'll go over in depth in a later session. One more tool I want to talk about that actually I don't have on a slide because it's very, very new. When I was checking out Class Dojo this week, just to make sure that I was completely refreshed, I saw that they're adding a new feature called, I want to say it was called Worksheets, and it's very new, so I haven't had the chance to use it yet. I'm going to check it out later this week, but it looks like you can post like questions and polls and things for students to answer right inside of Class Dojo, and they answer it, and it looks like you get pretty immediate feedback. So go ahead to the next slide, Elmer. If you come to my session where I go over Class Dojo a little more in depth, I'm going to check that out this week and make sure I cover it because that seems like a really cool feature as well. So that being said, I'll be doing a session on Class Dojo, Screencastify, and Padlet, and we'll dig just a little bit deeper into these, and I'll show you how to use them, and we'll talk about how we can use them to benefit our students during distance learning. It will be another Zoom session on Tuesday, June 30th, and it will be at 4:00 p.m., and there is the link there if you would like to register for that. And I think that's all I have, Elmer, if you want.
Thank you, Jane.
Yep.
And yes, the link that you see at the bottom of this slide is to the webinar page that has the listing for all the webinars, both the webinars that are upcoming and the recorded webinars that we've conducted. And you'll find that Tuesday, June 30th session on there if you want to sign up for it. We have a part 2 of teaching at a distance next Thursday. And that is on that same webpage as well, where you can sign up if you haven't. That one's going to be less me talking and more Janie talking, because we're going to do less work with concepts next week and more work with tools that you may want to use to help you with the concepts that we've gone over. So let me check with Mitzi and see if there's anything that she's seen in the chat or in the Q&A that we might need to talk about before we go. And I'll ask, are there any other questions before we close down the session? Well, I know it's been a lot of sitting and listening, and I appreciate your time. I hope that you found something in here that you can take and apply to whatever your situation is going to be next year, since we don't know exactly what it's going to be. Just one of these concepts about what do I do when I'm trying to herd all these cats, when I'm trying to keep all these kids together. And I hope you'll be able to use some of this successfully. I hope to see you all next Thursday when we do part 2 or in one of the other sessions. So thanks again for joining us today. Have a good day, and we'll be talking with you later.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.